Hello, Paul Pounds. So, yeah, I've been busy with life stuff that comes your way, and I have been absent, but I'm back on it now with ideas and things to talk about. So, today's is basically. There's a really wonderful YouTuber called Jules Burt. You should check him out. He's like the Bob Ross of book collecting. And he has done a video. He does lots of videos about books, but he's done a video about it's kind of 5 top tips for collecting vintage paperbacks and such. And I watched it, and I don't want to correct Jules, because every single point he makes is valid for him as a collector. Now, he's a totally different type of collector to me. And as I watched his video, this became apparent. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the tips he suggests and how I would change those, not improve them at all, because your book collection is as personal to you, like it's curated by you, and how you assemble that collection is also very personal to you, and your surroundings, your geographical location, your financial situation, everything. But first, new bookmark. I've got a new bookmark. Well, it's not new, it's quite old, but I just fell in love with it completely. It fell out of an annual in a charity shop, and I decided I wanted it. I don't know why it was in a kids' annual, but it's just the best bookmark I've ever seen. Now, normally I use surplus things from my old cigarette card collection as bookmarks, like duplicates and stuff, things I don't really need. But there's not many people that collect cigarette cards, so they don't get swapped or anything anymore. But this bookmark, prepare yourselves, ladies and gentlemen, for an awesome... Look at that! Just a massive fag. Brilliant, isn't it? For my transatlantic viewers, I do mean cigarillo. I know the word has a different connotation. And it offers cool, clean smoking and will not affect your throat. So yeah, lovely. Craven A. Bookmark. Love it. So if you want to check out Jules's video, I'll put a link to it in the description. I really urge you to check it out. Check out his channel generally. He's got an insane paperback collection. Absolutely insane. And it's not just paperbacks. He's got an insane vintage Star Wars collection. And not just like volume of stuff. It's not a huge collection, but everything is beautiful and pristine and boxed and carded. And yeah, he obviously got into collecting vintage Star Wars stuff at the right time. But yeah, I'll put a link to his video in the description. Have a watch of it, definitely. Like I said, this video isn't me criticising Jules, because it's a really fascinating and useful video that he made. I just come from a different direction with book collecting, and the more I watched of his video, the more apparent it became to me. So here's tip number 1. There's 5 tips. His tip number 1 is collect what you love. Which, yeah, that makes an awful lot of sense to me. And this was the first instance that I figured that me and Jules were very different book collectors. So he talks about whether it's a publisher. He collects by publisher. I collect by publisher, largely, like Hamlin and New English Library. I absolutely adore Hamlin Horror and New English Library Horror and Occult. They are like, I'd run into the house if it was on fire to save those bookcases. But he talks about collecting publishers and authors, which I get. I collect Guy and Smith novels. I collect William Hope Hodgson books, but also collecting cover artists, which is a lovely thing to be able to do. But this was the first little grain of like, I think me and Jules are coming at book collecting from totally different angles. But do collect what you love. These things that you buy in, like, I don't go on about it on my channel, but I collect stamps. I'm quite an avid stamp collector. I enjoy like an evening sat at my desk poring over stamps. I'm very specific about the regions and periods that I collect. And even though I've got ones from the mid to late 1800s, they're not really worth much. They were worth a bit at one point, and I really started getting into it when prices really dropped. And I've got family members who are quite well to do who have got staggering stamp collections that were insured for huge sums of money, but they're not worth that anymore. And at the minute, paperbacks are worth a lot of money. Some of them, you look at paperback prices and I've talked about it so many times on my channel, they go crazy. But like with stamps, and I've seen it with model trains and stuff like that, prices have plummeted because there just isn't the demand. And you look at what's commanding stupid high values, and one thing, you know, original like old Nintendo games that are still sealed, and Pokemon cards and things like that, and that'll give you an idea of who's entering the general collector's market and like applying their finances to get what they want. So yeah, buy what you love, because there's a good chance that these things are going to go down in price. And I don't really care how much my stamps are worth. I kind of like it that they're not worth much, because it means I can get like additions to my collection and fill gaps without having to spend too much money. And I still love them, and I still enjoy researching them and all that. So it doesn't matter how much they're worth. And that, buy what you love, is key. Number 2 is do your research. And I couldn't agree more with this. Whatever type of a collector you are, and I will get into the different types of collectors that we are, and I'll highlight the differences between me and Jules. Do your research. So Jules talks about, you know, are you biting off more than you can chew in terms of expense? If you're only collecting first edition Great Pan or Pan paperbacks, that's going to get pretty pricey, and they're going to get quite hard to find. He talks about his penguin collection. He collects penguin books and pelican books and puffin books and king penguins and everything. And there's so many, he knows he'll never really complete that collection because it's almost impossible. But yeah, do your research. Some people do still have this luxury, but where I am, geographically, there isn't a lot of second-hand bookshops. There's probably like one good one in the city that I live in. And they're not really that interested in horror. Their horror section is like horror, fantasy and sci-fi, and it's a couple of shelves, so you're not going to really drop on much. So doing your research, for me, means checking out what's out there and spending time online, hunting round message boards, forums, blogs, just looking at what other people are reading, and then getting a little almost like an arsenal together of like sites, websites, book dealers that you like to use. Now, I don't like eBay. I can't cope with eBay. I can't cope with an auction. It makes me way too anxious. It just freaks me out. I really struggle. So I can't bid on things. So eBay's a no-no for me. Amazon I find all right on occasions, but a little bit pricey. But there's a lot of book dealers that I use their websites to start hunting things down, and you can sometimes spot a book on a blog or something like that. I've got a very good friend who just Googles the publisher and then vintage horror retro paperback and see what comes up, and it's like, all right, I've never come across that one, and I got a couple of bits and bobs recently by doing that, and then hunting round on book dealers' websites. There's a lot out there. There's a lot of people that just seem to sell old paperbacks from their lockup or basement or house or whatever, and that's usually where the best deals, I think, are. In terms of research for horror paperbacks, don't rely on things like Paperbacks from Hell. It's a brilliant book. I love my copy and just sit and browse it more than I actually read it. I just sit and look at the pictures. But how many other people the world over that are into horror paperbacks are also browsing Paperbacks from Hell? Find other avenues that maybe aren't quite as explored. I've said this before on videos, I can't really get to second-hand bookshops, and there's none in the city I live in. So an evening sat listening to some records with a cup of tea and Victor on my lap, browsing blogs and forums for new ideas for books I'd like to get, and then seeing who's got them and what kind of price they are is my new it's not as lovely as going to second-hand bookshops, but it's kind of replaced that in my life. Whereas before I'd just go to all the second-hand bookshops when there used to be loads, browse the horror section and go, oh, I've not seen that before, that's cool. That's been taken away from me. It's probably been taken away from a lot of people. So do your research, but try not to do the same research that everybody else is doing. Number 3 was a very practical and horrible thing that we have to think about is, do you have room? Now, Jules approached Do You Have Room from the point of view of he buys a lot of job lots to get a few out of that job lot, and then sells on the ones he upgrades some of his own collection and then sells on the rest. Now, I'm not organised enough to do that. I just end up with boxes and boxes and boxes. And the few times I've tried to buy job lots, I've just about always been outbid. And even when I've tried to buy job lots with a friend so we can pool our financial punch, we've still lost out. So I don't really buy job lots. Now, it's worked for Jules, but it doesn't work for me. And this was where it clicked in my head. The different type of collectors that we are. Now, like I said, Jules has got a staggering collection. But I start to think, and as much as he obviously loves reading, every book that I've got, I've either read and enjoyed or will read. I dedicate a lot of time to reading, and it's not an effort. I find it very weird when friends are like, oh, I wish I could read more. Well, just do it. Just turn off Emmerdale and sit for the night and read a book. And very soon you'll discover, or I have discovered, that like, no matter how good a ghost story is filmed, for example, The Haunting of Hill House, the TV series, there's some amazing ghosts in that. I love the tall dude with the walking stick that just floats along. He's brilliant. but that's still someone else's visualization. Whereas if I read a ghost story and it's actually quite creepy, my imagination can do so much more than any director with a budget for special effects and visual effects can. So every book I buy, I am excited about reading and do read. I do get through a lot. Whereas I think Jules is like I said, as much as I know he loves reading, you can tell, and he talks about things he's read and all that, but he's very much an accumulative collector, and I'm a practical collector. So everything I buy is to read 100%. I get the feeling sometimes that the things that Jules buys are for his collection. And I think buying big job lots regularly will get me down a little bit because I'd be way in front. Now, I've got loads of stuff. My people talk about a to be read pile. If you haven't at least got a couple of to be read bookcases, you're not even trying. But I don't buy things just to go into a collection. I buy things that I would love to read. I don't buy New English Library sci-fi because I'm not really into sci-fi. And I know I'm going to put off reading them, just forever. Whereas a bit of crime, there's some pretty cool New English Library crime books. I do like a bit of like gangster nonsense. So if I get a nice New English Library crime book, I know I'm probably going to have a little break from horror at some point and read that. Tip number 4. Jules suggested that you buy wisely, which makes sense, obviously. Don't just buy ridiculously, because that's not going to work. No. So Jules talks about buying books one by one for your collection, and it's going to cost you more. It is going to cost you more. But I know what I'm like, and if I, going back to point number 3, if I bought job lots, there'd probably be things in there that I'm a bit like, I might just keep that. If they're in my house, I know I want to add them into a collection somewhere. So I buy 99% of my books individually, one by one. And yes, I pay a little bit more, but I also spread out the cost of building a collection, which for me is the best way to do it. I wouldn't necessarily be able to afford to just jump in and buy a huge job lot. I bet it's so exciting if you buy like a few boxes of old paperbacks and they arrive at your house and you just dig in through them. That must be an absolute thrill. But not all of us can afford to do that. And not all of us are the right kinds of collectors to do that. Like I said before, Jules has got these amazing collections and he accumulates books to go into those collections. Everything, every last thing I've got, I am going to sit and read. And I wouldn't have anything I wouldn't read taking up space in my house. Now, I'm not, like I said, I'm not criticising anyone for how they collect because it's very, very personal how this hobby makes you happy. But like, I look at Jules's penguin collection when he showcases that on YouTube, and yeah, he's got some gorgeous penguins. I've got some lovely penguins, Algernon Blackwood and M.R. James and all that kind of stuff, and I love them. But I wouldn't go as far as collecting the Pelican books about history and psychology and more studious subjects. They look lovely when there's a whole shelf full of those blue spines. I would think they look gorgeous, but I would never ever ever sit and read them. I've got a couple literally again, but about witchcraft. So this is highlighting the difference in how we are collectors, and it's not just the difference in how me and Jules are different collectors, it's the difference in all of us, every single one of us that's any kind of a book collector. will have our own little triggers that make us want something, and everybody's unique in how they curate their collection. But yeah, buy wisely. So number 5 is buy the best you can. Again, I can't knock Jules. I'm not knocking Jules's 5 top tips. You should buy the best you can. I don't buy pristine when I can, because I know I'm going to sit and read it. And I've had... When I used to be a very, very avid comic collector, and I was obsessed with collecting original EC comics, Tales from the Crypt, Vault of Horror, Haunt of Fear. And I got the best grades I could. And at the time, I had a really well-paying job. So I did buy, I could just go to comic conventions and say, yes, I will have that because it's beautiful and pristine. But then you get it home, and what the hell can you do with it? They would sit in Mylar sleeves in a box. I'd protect them from sunlight. I wouldn't really handle them because they were too fragile. And I ended up selling the whole collection. Actually, to buy some Star Wars board games, Imperial Assault, for me and my lad. And we played it to death for years, and we loved it. And for me, like, having something I can use and utilise and enjoy is much more important than owning the thing in the first place. So when I bought my copy of The Monster Club by Ron Chetwynd Hayes, I knew I wanted the original cover. I didn't want the photo cover with Vincent Price. I did want the original illustrated cover, but I didn't buy a super pristine one, even though I could afford a super pristine one, because part of the thrill for me was knowing that I'm going to sit, like I've said, with a cup of tea and Victor on my lap and read that book and thoroughly enjoy everything about that book. The cover, the smell, the feel of the pages. Paperbacks back then were, mid-70s, were a bit cheaper. The pages are a bit rougher. The type's a bit smaller, so I get my reading glasses on. Everything comes together to make a singular experience for me while I read that book. And being able to handle it and hold it and turn the pages. And now I have got a couple of techniques for how to read a book without damaging the spine too much. But, like, everything I have, I get it that number 5, Jules says, buy the best you can. Yeah, if you're looking at value of investment, and going back to my stamp collection, these things probably won't hold their value. They'll be the next thing along in 10, 20 years that'll be impossible to predict. And that's what people will get stuck into collecting. And I think a lot of our collections, my lad doesn't want my book collection. He's like, what the hell would I do with it? And I'm like, yeah, but there's signed Arthur Machen first editions. He's like, well, I'm not fussed. I just want a new computer. And these things are going to go, and their value is going to drop. So yes, buy the best you can. But make sure that you buying a pristine and very expensive vintage paperback is going to make you happy just by owning it. Whereas I'd rather spend a bit less and maybe get one that isn't in as good condition. The spine's maybe already cracked, but I am going to read it and I am going to enjoy it. And I'm going to read it carefully and look after it. I won't have it kicking about in my satchel when I'm out and about. But yeah, buy the best you can if that's the kind of collector you are. I want to read my stuff. I'm not, and again, I hope none of this sounds like a criticism to Jules, because genuinely his channel is so relaxing. He's just like such a chilled dude that adores books, and his channel's a pleasure to watch. But like the pristine collector, I don't like using the word mentality, but it kind of is. I don't mean it in a negative way. It's just that mindset. That's a better word. Mindset. But that pristine collector mindset, like, I haven't got that. I want to own the things because I want to enjoy them. And if I drop them, and if they get bumped, or if Victor comes up and like rubs his gums along the top of one of my books, I try not to let him do it. But sometimes he's just like, oh. That's part of my life and my enjoyment of books. So yeah, buy the best you can, but bear in mind, owning things, like with my EC comics, owning things that you can't touch and open and read and enjoy. I ended up getting reprints of EC comics and I can sit and read them. And when my lad got old enough, it was like, oh, Dad, what are they? I'm like, right, read that pile there. Get stuck into them. Rather than, that's sealed forever in Mylar. Or slabbed. Don't get me started on the weirdness of graded comics. I find that bizarre, just like sealing them away forever. You'll never look at them again, apart from the front and back covers. That's it. It's gone forever. All the lovely internal things are gone. That kind of freaks me out a little bit. But if you're like a comic collector and you collect sealed and graded comic books and they make you happy, then that's what it's about. That's what it's about. Spending your money on things that you love. So I don't want to ramble on too long. I know Jules' original video was 7 minutes long and I've talked for however long. Looking at the timer on my camera and it's like, I've not edited yet, but it's already half an hour. So I'll leave it there. Maybe, I think a top tip I would add, tip number 6, and this is the most important vintage paperback collecting tip. Decide what you want to do with your collection. Decide if you're happy to just have a beautiful shelf full of pristine old things. And these were designed to be disposable and to get, you know, they don't last forever. They're not designed to last forever. So to assemble a beautiful bookcase full of pristine vintage paperbacks, that's awesome. But it takes away a lot. Or would you be rather like the kind of collector that maybe doesn't get the super top high grade ones and your collection is a little bit tatty, but you can sit and read it and sniff it and touch it and interact with it more. So that will be my 6th tip. Decide what kind of a collector you're going to be. And I'm not criticising either. I've got friends that collect things that seal them away forever in whatever current, like, trading card sleeve or whatever. That's fine. That makes them happy. I just like to be able to interact with my things. Look at case in point. Look at my Aldous Huxley books. Like, that point and counterpoints pretty much lost its lost its sleeve entirely. His book jacket. Brief Candles. It's knackered. But these get read. These get, like, poured over and enjoyed. And like I said about, my lad's not interested in Aldous Huxley. He doesn't care who Aldous Huxley is. He's more interested in, I don't know anything useful to make a comparison to, because I'm a farty, old, boring book collector. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for watching, and I will see you lovely folks in the next video.